Number 1. Snowman. The kids in my neighborhood were really well known for making snowmen, and they wouldn't just put them up in their own yard either. They would build snowmen throughout winter and put them up in yards all over the neighborhood. It wasn't an unusual sight to wake up one morning and see a snowman in your yard where no snowman had been before. One year, which I will never, ever forget, there was a purpose to the snowmen being put up that was other than just entertainment. A young boy in the town, a first grader if I remember correctly, had never come home from school. Our neighborhood was very close to the elementary school, and parents at the time seldom walked their kids to school and back. This happened quite a long time ago, mind you. Most of the kids in the neighborhood walked to school around the same time, so it wasn't like the kids were alone. It seemed less likely that something would have happened to the kids when this happened. But that boy didn't come home. Groups were organized to do a search for the boy. The police questioned everyone, but he was not found. The children in the neighborhood built more snowmen that year than they had ever built before, and around the neck of each snowman they put a sign with a picture of the little boy who had gone missing. Nearly every single yard in the neighborhood had a snowman built in their yard. Pictures of that little boy littered the entire area, and although it warmed the hearts of the people who lived there, it was all for naught, because they didn't help us find that boy. I won't mention where I lived, because I don't want to draw undue attention to the area. As I mentioned, this happened long ago, but the winters were long. A lot longer than they are now, or so it seemed. And those snowmen lasted a long time. And in the months that those snowmen lasted, they did little to help find that little boy. In the spring, of course, the snowmen began melting. They had been up for quite a long time, so they were icy. They took time to melt. After about a week of constant warm days and constant warm sunshine, they were mostly gone. And that was when I made the worst discovery of my life. You see, I was a student at the elementary school when that little boy was also. And I was walking to school one day, noticing how the snowmen were now snow half-men. And it was then that I saw something I wish I could unsee even decades later. One of the snowmen, only one, caught my eye as I was walking to school. There was something weird and off about the shape of it as it was melting. It was only then, upon closer inspection, that I began screaming and calling other students closer to me. You see, there was the body of a boy inside that snowman, and the snowman was built on the yard of the parents of that boy. Whatever insane person murdered that poor boy made sure he was only meters from his parents all winter long, but completely unable to be found.
Number 2. Working. I don't really celebrate Christmas much. It's probably more because I don't have anyone to celebrate it with, rather than having anything in particular against the holiday itself. I live by myself, and because of this, I generally always volunteer to work during Christmas at the convenience store that I am employed at. I actually enjoy working there because there's never too much business on that day. Now that bigger stores are open more often on holidays, we don't really get the sort of business we once did. I was working Christmas night a few years back. It was dark and very cold outside, and I was watching some television on a little set. I had not seen a customer in a really long time. I heard the bell on the door jingle and looked up to see the weirdest sight I had ever seen. A guy dressed as Santa Claus came into the door, but he was the weirdest looking one I had ever seen. The white parts of his costume had been splattered red and made me immediately think that they had been covered in blood. I thought it was just some sort of sick prank and really tried my best not to think about it. The Santa gathered up a lot of items and brought them to the counter. He looked quite sinister, but I did my best not to stare at him. I wondered why he was purchasing so much, but didn't say anything. It wasn't my business. He paid me by giving me a big wad of cash and then left the store. I thought it was weird, but I went back to watching my show. About half an hour later, I heard the bell jingle again. I was surprised we were getting another customer so quickly. I looked up and was shocked to see a man crawling into the convenience store. He was covered in stab wounds and blood. I quickly ran around the counter to help him, asking him what happened to him. And what he told me shocked me. He said he was jumped and stabbed multiple times by a man dressed as Santa. The man took all of his money and left him in a ditch. I called 911 and got the man an ambulance and reported the incident to the police. They were never able to catch the guy because they had no real idea of what he looked like.
Number 3. Reverse Santa. Christmas isn't supposed to be a time to be scared. Also, a person's strongest memory of their childhood Christmases shouldn't be one of terror. Unfortunately, mine was quite frightening. I never believed in Santa Claus at all. I don't know why. My little brother Phil was the complete opposite though. He seemed to believe in Santa Claus so strongly that the slightest implication that he didn't exist would be taken personal. He would actually do his best to hide and catch Santa when he was leaving presents, so he would have the proof needed to put me in my place. Fortunately for my parents, he always fell asleep from waiting too long. They'd put him back to bed and then put the presents out. He always got angry at himself in the morning for not being able to remain awake. Fortunately, those thoughts would all soon leave his mind as he became entranced with the opening of presents. When Phil was 9, I began to think that he had outgrown his need to try and prove that Santa Claus existed. He was in bed even before I was. I let my parents know he was fast asleep so they wouldn't have to outwait him. They went ahead and put the presents out early so they could go to bed. They knew I didn't believe in Santa Claus and wouldn't be going and examining the presents. They went to bed then, and I went to bed too. I woke up feeling someone shaking me. I opened my eyes and noticed that it was dark. I saw Phil was the one shaking me awake. I told him that we weren't allowed to go out and open presents until it was morning. I tried to push him away until he said something to me that was confusing enough that I had to put aside sleep for explanation. "Is there a reverse Santa Claus?" Phil asked me. "What are you talking about?" I asked him. "I went to bed early so I could be up later because I wanted to catch Santa Claus," he explained. "There's someone there, but he's taking things, not leaving them." I sat straight up in bed, realizing instantly that either my brother must have had a bad dream or that someone indeed had broken into our house. I began getting out of bed and he began telling me that he would show me. I made him be quiet and to stay in the room while I checked it out. Yeah, I probably should have gone right to my parents, but I really was like 80% sure that there was nothing to get excited about. I crept out into the hallway and made my way close to the living room. I didn't see anything at first, and I just believed that my brother was imagining things. But then, I heard a noise coming off from the far side of the living room. There was a sliding glass door out there. I snuck around the corner just in time to see a man closing the glass door behind him. As he latched it, fate had him look up until he was looking at me directly eye to eye. I got a very good look at his face, and he knew it. I saw the man start to open the door again. As I turned and ran down the hallway at full speed, I began pounding on my dad's door as loudly as I could. My dad got up and I let him know that someone had broken into the house and was coming back in. By this point, Phil had heard the commotion and was in the hallway. My dad shooed both of us into the room and then went to look around the house. After a long time, we heard a knocking on the door. Our hearts jumped, but it was just our dad. No one was in the house, although things were missing. My mom had already called the police. The reverse Santa Claus, as my brother called him, was arrested that night. He had taken things from ours and a few other houses. A fillet knife was found in a holster inside his jacket, and that made me wonder what he may have done if he had caught me.
Number 4, Ride Home. This happened 5 years ago. I had just started working for an actuary firm. I was in their call center though, so I don't mean to make it seem like I had a really good job or anything. But still, I wanted to prove myself, so I volunteered to work overtime. After work, I would stay behind and make sure that I was completely caught up on my project work as well. I volunteered to work on Christmas Eve, trying to get in good with my boss. About 2 hours before the day was over, I looked out the window and noticed the snow beginning to fall. I kept watching it as the last 2 hours passed by, and I noticed it wasn't slowing down, and it began piling up pretty quickly. To make matters even worse, since there were only a few of us working on Christmas Eve, there was a large call queue by the time we closed, and we couldn't leave until all the calls in it were taken care of. It was about an hour and a half after closing that I finally got out and was able to begin heading home. It took me a while to get all the snow off of my car. This just made it even later. The snowplows were out, but they hadn't done much of a thorough job yet. I had to drive pretty slowly to keep from skidding off the side of the road. The one good thing was, likely because it was Christmas Eve, there weren't many cars on the road. When I turned into my neighborhood, as I was coming around the corner, someone suddenly came out in front of the car. I slammed on my brakes really hard, which I know was not the smartest thing to do, but it was a natural reaction, and turned the steering wheel towards the side of the road. My car skidded in the snow, and I slammed right into a telephone pole. For the first time in my life, I actually got knocked out. I regained consciousness, but didn't open my eyes right away. It was cold, and I heard some voices talking. It didn't take me very long to realize that I had only been out for a short period of time. I must have moved a little bit, because I heard a voice instruct someone else. He just moved a little. Grab your knife. It looks like he might be coming too. I may have just been in a car accident, but I had my wits enough about me to realize this was not something I wanted to hear. I didn't open my eyes and pretended to still be out. I felt a cold edge up against my neck and assumed It was the knife being talked about. I felt someone messing around with my coat pocket. They pulled out my wallet and my cell phone. The blade was still up against my neck. Okay, I think I got it all. Let's get the hell out of here. I heard the first voice say, maybe I should cut him up a bit first. I heard another voice say, and I felt my blood freeze. But fortunately, the first voice just laughed and demurred. I finally felt the blade come away from my neck, and I listened as the two guys ran off. I opened my eyes, but it was hard to see them as the snow was falling heavily. I tried starting my car back up, and it did start. I was really close to my house, so I drove there and got out of my car. I kept expecting the two guys to come back and finish what they started, but they didn't. I got inside and got in touch with both the police and an ambulance. It only took a day for the police to find the kids, who were stupid enough to try and use one of my credit cards, and it was traced immediately, and they were arrested. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. So, this is a weird video to get out on December 30th, I have to admit. I planned on getting this out sooner, but the holiday really got me worn out. I had to get my butt in gear though, because I needed to release it before I released anything about New Year's. I would like to thank my friends Being Scared and Mortis Media for taking part in this collaboration. I have links to both of their videos in the description, plus there will be links at the end of the video. Be sure to check them both out, and to subscribe if you haven't already. If you would like to read print versions of these stories, check them out at the Killer Orange Cat subreddit in the link provided. Feel free to also visit the Killer Orange Cat merchandise store in the link provided. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, or using the icon of Ichigo that will appear at the end of this closing. Feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter using the links in the description. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address included in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any other YouTube channel. I hope you guys all had a good holiday season, and please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.